Commander Zethkar sat in the quiet room on the space station. The old alien warrior looked out at the stars through the big window. His three eyes moved slowly as he watched the young officers gather around him. They all wanted to hear his stories about humans. "You want to know about the war at Proxima Station?" Zethkar said in his deep voice. "I was there. I saw what humans do when they fight. I saw things that still wake me up at night." The commander's blue skin had many scars from old battles. His hands shook a little as he started talking. He remembered the siege that lasted 3 months. The enemy had surrounded the human colony with thousands of ships. Most alien races would give up after a few days, but not humans. The humans were trapped, Zethkar continued. No food coming in, no weapons, no help from outside. Their leader was Captain Linda Brown. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, but when she looked at you, it felt like looking at a predator. The young officers leaned forward to listen better. They had heard stories about human warriors, but never from someone who fought beside them. Captain Brown did something that shocked everyone. Instead of fighting with guns and bombs, she started a different kind of war, a war inside the enemy's minds. The humans began broadcasting strange sounds on all radio channels, children singing soft songs, old women telling bedtime stories. The sounds played all day and all night. "At first we thought it was stupid," Zethkar said. "But after 1 week, the enemy soldiers started acting strange. They could not sleep. They became nervous and afraid. The sweet songs from human children became like poison in their ears." The siege continued. The humans got more creative with their tactics. When the enemy blocked their radio signals, the humans found new ways to send messages. They wrote battle plans on their own skin with special ink. Then they let themselves get captured on purpose. Sergeant Bob Miller was one of these volunteers. He covered his body with tattoos that looked like art, but the tattoos were actually maps and secret codes. When the enemy caught him, they put him in prison with other captured humans. That night, Bob used the information hidden on his skin to help everyone escape. But the most frightening thing happened on day 45, Zethkar told his audience. His voice got quieter and the young officers moved closer to hear. A human soldier named Jack Stone walked into the enemy camp. He carried a big bomb strapped to his chest. Everyone thought he came to blow up the base. But Jack did something unexpected. He threw down his weapons and put his hands up. "I surrender," Jack said to the enemy soldiers. The enemy was confused but happy. They thought they caught an important prisoner. They put Jack in their main prison building with all the other captured humans. But Jack had a plan. The bomb on his chest was real, but it was also a trick. Jack told the enemy guards that if anyone tried to hurt the prisoners, he would blow up the whole building. The guards became scared and stayed away. That night, Jack used wire cutters hidden in his boots to cut through the prison walls. He freed 50 human prisoners. They all escaped back to their colony. Jack walked out last, still wearing the bomb, still threatening to use it if anyone tried to stop him. The enemy soldiers just watched him leave, Zethkar said. They were too afraid to shoot. A human with a bomb scared them more than 100 soldiers with guns. The war continued for 2 more months. The humans kept using strange tactics that hurt the enemy's minds more than their bodies. They sent recordings of human laughter into enemy ships. They painted scary pictures on the sides of buildings where enemy scouts would see them. They even trained their pet dogs to howl in patterns that sounded like warning sirens. Captain Brown organized something called ghost attacks. Human soldiers would sneak into enemy camps at night. But instead of fighting, they would move things around. They would put enemy weapons in different places. They would change the settings on enemy computers. They would leave human footprints in the mud near important buildings. The enemy soldiers started thinking their own base was haunted, Zethkar explained. They began fighting with each other. They accused their friends of being human spies. Some of them went crazy and started shooting at shadows. The most clever trick came near the end. The humans found the enemy's food supply ships. Instead of destroying the ships, they broke in and changed the food slightly. They added human spices that tasted terrible to the enemy race. They mixed up the packages so enemy soldiers never knew what they would eat. "Hungry soldiers are angry soldiers," Captain Brown had told Zethkar. "Angry soldiers make mistakes, Soldiers who make mistakes lose wars. On day 97, the enemy finally gave up. They had more ships, better weapons, and more soldiers. But they could not handle the pressure anymore. Their troops were exhausted, paranoid, and afraid. The human colony was saved. After the battle, Zethkar asked Captain Brown why humans fought so strangely. She looked at him with her cold human eyes and smiled. "Commander," she said, "other races fight to win battles. Humans fight to survive wars. When you fight to survive, you use everything. Your mind, your fear, your enemy's fear. You use whatever works." Zethkar finished his story and looked at the young officers around him. They all looked shocked and a little scared. "That was my first lesson about humans," he told them. "They do not fight like soldiers. They fight like animals backed into a corner. And a cornered animal is the most dangerous creature in the universe." Zethkar looked around the room at the young officers. Their faces showed fear and confusion after hearing about the siege at Proxima Station. But the old commander was not finished with his stories. "The second time I fought with humans was different," he said slowly. "We were fighting an enemy called the Void Runners. They had better ships than us, better weapons. They had been conquering planets for thousands of years. We were losing badly." The commander stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars looked peaceful and quiet. But Zethkar remembered when those same stars had been full of war and death. "The coalition leaders sent a human officer to help us," he continued. Her name was Colonel Mary Davis. She was tall and thin with short black hair and dark eyes. When she looked at our battle plans, she started laughing. The young officers glanced at each other. They could not understand why anyone would laugh during a losing war. "I asked her what was funny," Zethkar said. "She told me that we were fighting like prey animals. She said humans learned long ago that the best way to fight is to become the hunter, not the hunted." Colonel Davis brought a new kind of warfare to the coalition fleet. She called it shadow hunting. Instead of big battles with many ships, she wanted to use small teams of humans to sneak onto enemy ships. But they were not going there to fight, Zethkar explained. They were going there to play with the enemy's minds. The human teams were led by a sergeant named Tom Clark. Tom was a short man with red hair and many scars on his arms. He had fought in wars on Earth before coming to space. He knew how to make enemies afraid without even touching them. Tom's first mission was to board a Void Runner command ship. He took 5 other humans with him. They wore special suits that made them invisible to enemy sensors. They moved through the ship like ghosts in the night, but instead of destroying the ship's weapons or engines, Tom did something strange. He went to the ship's kitchen and changed all the food. He mixed sleeping medicine into their drinks. He put itching powder in their uniforms. He programmed their computers to play soft human music at random times. The Void Runners did not notice anything at first, Zethkar said. But after a few days, strange things started happening on their ship. The enemy soldiers began feeling sleepy during important battles. Their skin started itching and they could not focus on their work. Mysterious music would play in empty rooms. Some soldiers reported seeing human faces in the shadows, but when they looked again, nothing was there. Another human team was led by Corporal Lisa Green. She was an expert at breaking into computer systems. Lisa would sneak onto enemy ships and change their database files. She would switch the names on doors, so enemy soldiers would get lost in their own ship. She would change their duty schedules, so some soldiers would show up for work at the wrong time. But Lisa's best trick was changing the enemy's personal files. She would add fake medical records saying that certain soldiers had dangerous diseases. She would change their family photos to show human faces instead. She would even add human names to their family trees. The enemy soldiers started thinking they were going crazy, Zethkar explained. They began fighting with each other. Some thought their friends were actually human spies in disguise. The most frightening human tactic came from Captain Bill Jones. Bill was a quiet man who smiled too much. He had an idea that made even other humans uncomfortable. Captain Jones started collecting the bodies of dead Void Runner soldiers, Zethkar said. His voice got very quiet. He would take them back to their own ships and leave them in places where living soldiers would find them. But Bill did not just leave the bodies. He would pose them in strange ways. Sometimes he would make them look like they were reading human books. Sometimes he would put human jewelry on them. Sometimes he would leave human food in their hands. The Void Runners believed their dead friends were trying to tell them something. Zethkar continued. Some enemy soldiers refused to sleep alone. Others would not eat food unless someone else tried it first. Fear spread through their fleet like a disease. The strangest part was how normal this seemed to the humans. They talked about their scary missions like other soldiers might talk about routine patrol duties. Colonel Davis would give orders to haunt the enemy ships in the same voice she used to order lunch. Private Dan White was part of a team that snuck into enemy sleeping quarters. Instead of hurting anyone, they would just move things around. They would switch people's personal belongings. They would leave human handprints on mirrors. They would hide small speakers that would whisper human words at night. After 6 weeks of this treatment, something incredible happened, Zethkar said. The Void Runners sent us a message they wanted to surrender. The young officers looked shocked. An enemy that had been winning the war suddenly wanted to give up. We could not believe it, Zethkar continued. The Void Runners still had more ships than us. They still had better weapons, but their soldiers were breaking down mentally. Some of them were so scared they would not leave their rooms. Others saw human faces everywhere they looked. The surrender meeting took place on a neutral space station. The Void Runner commander was a tall alien with purple skin and 4 arms. When he met Colonel Davis, his hands were shaking. Your species fights like demons, the enemy commander told her. We cannot defeat an enemy that lives in our nightmares. Colonel Davis smiled her cold human smile. We are not demons, she said. We are just very good hunters. And good hunters know that the mind is the best weapon. After the war ended, Zethkar asked Colonel Davis why humans were so good at psychological warfare. She thought for a moment before answering. Commander, she said, humans spent thousands of years hunting animals that were bigger and stronger than us. We learned that you do not need to be the strongest to win. You just need to be the smartest. And the scariest. Zethkar finished his second story and sat down heavily in his chair. The young officers looked disturbed and amazed at the same time. That was my second lesson about humans, he told them. They do not just fight with their bodies. They fight with their minds. And a human mind focused on war is the most terrifying weapon in the galaxy. Zethkar stood up and moved to the center of the room. The young officers watched him carefully. They could see that this next story was harder for him to tell. His 3 eyes looked sad, and his voice became softer. My third experience with humans happened during the Battle of New Eden, he began. This was different from the other wars. This time the humans were defending their own home, their first colony outside Earth's solar system. The enemy was called the Swarm. They were like a giant hive of insects, but they flew spaceships and used advanced weapons. The Swarm had one mind that controlled millions of bodies. They had already destroyed 17 different planets and enslaved the people living there. The Swarm brought 3,000 ships to attack New Eden, Zethkar continued. The humans had only 150 ships to defend their colony. Any other species would have evacuated the planet immediately. But humans are not like other species. The human commander was General Susan Wright. She was an older woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had fought in many wars and seen too much death. But when the Swarm surrounded New Eden, General Wright did something that shocked everyone. She activated something called Protocol Red, Zethkar said. I learned later that this was a human plan that had never been used before. It was their last resort when everything else failed. Protocol Red meant that every human on the planet became a soldier. Not just the military people, but everyone. Old people, young people, even children. Every ship, every building, every piece of equipment became a weapon. The first wave of attacks came from civilian cargo ships. These were big, slow vessels that normally carried food and supplies between planets. But the humans had filled them with explosives and pointed them at enemy ships. Captain Mike Adams was piloting one of these cargo ships. He was a merchant, not a soldier. He had a wife and 3 children waiting for him on the planet below. When Zethkar asked him why he was flying a suicide mission, Mike just smiled. My kids need a future, Mike said simply. This is how I give them one. Mike flew his ship straight into a swarm command vessel. The explosion destroyed both ships and killed everyone on board, but it also created a gap in the enemy formation that allowed other human ships to attack. The second wave came from construction, workers and miners. These humans knew how to use heavy machinery and explosives. They loaded their workships with mining charges and drove them into enemy formations. A woman named Carol Johnson was operating a mining robot. She had worked in the asteroid belt for 15 years and knew how to handle dangerous equipment. Carol programmed her robot to attach explosive charges to enemy ship hulls, then fly away before the bombs went off. What made it terrifying, Zethkar said, was how calm the humans were about dying. They talked about suicide missions like other people talked about going to the grocery store. The most disturbing part came when the swarm landed troops on the planet's surface. The human military was outnumbered 50-1, but General Wright had prepared for this too. Every human civilian had been given weapons and training. Store clerks became snipers. Teachers became bomb makers. Even children as young as 12 were taught how to make traps and set ambushes. A man named Robert Lee was a school principal before the war. When swarm soldiers invaded his town, Robert organized the children into small groups. He taught them how to hide in sewers and abandoned buildings. Then he gave them small bombs to carry. The children would walk up to enemy soldiers and pretend to be scared refugees, Zethkar explained. When the soldiers bent down to help them, the children would activate their bombs. Both the children and the soldiers would die. The young officers in the room looked horrified. They could not imagine asking children to sacrifice their lives in war. But that was not the worst part, Zethkar continued. The worst part was that the human children volunteered for these missions. They wanted to die for their planet. The war continued for 8 months. The swarm had superior numbers and technology, but they could not understand human behavior. Every time they captured a human position, the prisoners would find ways to keep fighting. A nurse named Betty Clark was captured when the swarm took over the main hospital. Instead of giving up, she began poisoning enemy soldiers who came to her for medical treatment. She used medicine that would make them sick slowly, so they would not realize what was happening until it was too late. When the swarm finally figured out what Betty was doing, they executed her. But by then she had poisoned over 200 enemy soldiers. The turning point came when the swarm thought they had won completely. They controlled all the major cities and military bases. The human fleet was destroyed. Most of the population was dead or captured, but the humans had one more surprise waiting. General Wright had hidden nuclear weapons in secret bunkers all over the planet. She had trained civilian volunteers to maintain these weapons and wait for her signal. When the swarm thought they were safe, Wright activated all the nuclear devices at once. The explosions destroyed half the planet, Zethkar said quietly. Millions of humans died, but so did most of the swarm invasion force. The surviving swarm ships fled from New Eden immediately. They had won the battle, but the cost was too high. They had lost so many ships and soldiers that they could not continue their conquest of human space. But the most chilling part came later. Zethkar learned that General Wright had planned to destroy the entire planet if necessary. She was prepared to kill every human on New Eden rather than let them become slaves. I asked her why humans were willing to die so easily, Zethkar said. She looked at me with those tired human eyes and gave me an answer I will never forget. General, Wright had said, Commander, freedom is not something you can buy or trade for. It is something you have to earn. And sometimes the price of earning it is everything you have. After the war, Zethkar visited the ruins of New Eden. The planet was mostly destroyed, but the surviving humans were already rebuilding. They sang songs about the people who had died. They told stories about the children who had sacrificed themselves. They were not sad about the deaths, Zethkar told his audience. They were proud. To humans, dying for freedom is the greatest honor possible. Zethkar sat down heavily in his chair. The room was completely silent. The young officers looked shocked and disturbed. That was my third lesson about humans, he said finally. They do not fear death. They fear slavery more than death. and that makes them impossible to defeat completely. Zethkar looked at the young officers one last time. Their faces showed fear, confusion, and respect after hearing his 3 war stories, but the old commander had one more tale to tell. This one was different from the others because it did not happen during a war. It happened during peace talks. My final story is about a meeting, Zethkar began. It was after all the fighting had ended. The great powers of the galaxy came together to make treaties and divide up territory. Everyone thought it would be boring diplomatic work. The peace conference was held on a neutral space station called Harmony Point. Representatives from dozens of different alien species came to negotiate. The humans sent only one person to represent their entire civilization. His name was Ambassador Paul Green, Zethkar said. He was a quiet man, maybe 60, years old with gray hair and gentle eyes. He looked like someone's grandfather, not a dangerous diplomat. The negotiations started badly for the humans. The other alien races had formed alliances against them. They were afraid of human military power, so they wanted to limit human expansion into space. They demanded that humans give up their new colonies and pay huge amounts of money as punishment for winning their wars. The hegemony ambassador was leading the talks against humans. He was a tall, proud alien who thought humans were just another primitive species. He spoke to Ambassador Green like he was talking to a child. "Your species will accept our terms," the hegemony ambassador said. "You have no choice. We outnumber you 1,000 to 1. If you refuse, we will crush you." Ambassador Green listened quietly for 3 days. He took notes and asked polite questions. He never raised his voice or showed anger. The other aliens began to think he was weak and scared. But on the 4th day, something changed. A young alien diplomat from the Centauri Republic made a mistake. He laughed at humans and called them hairless apes who got lucky in a few small battles. Ambassador Green slowly stood up from his chair. The room became very quiet. When he spoke, his voice was soft and calm, but everyone could hear the danger underneath. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," Ambassador Green said. "You seem to believe that humans are afraid of you. Let me tell you some stories about my people, so you can make better decisions." The ambassador walked to the center of the room. He activated a holographic projector and began showing images from Earth's history. "This is a place called Stalingrad," he said, showing pictures of a destroyed city. "During our Second World War, humans fought each other for control of this city. The battle lasted 6 months. Over 2 million people died. But here is the interesting part. The hologram showed human soldiers fighting in the ruins of buildings. They were using broken glass as weapons and eating rats to survive. The defending humans could have surrendered at any time." Ambassador Green continued. "They were outnumbered and surrounded, but they chose to fight in the rubble until almost everyone was dead. They turned every room into a fortress and every street into a battlefield." The alien diplomats watched the images with growing discomfort. They had never seen such destruction caused by a species fighting itself. "This is Dresden," Ambassador Green said, changing the hologram. "My people dropped firebombs on this city and burned it to ash in one night. 25,000 humans died in a few hours. We did this to our own species during a war." The next image showed mushroom clouds rising over cities. "These are Hiroshima and Nagasaki," the ambassador explained. "We used atomic weapons against ourselves. We turned the power of stars into bombs and dropped them on cities full of civilians. We killed over 200,000 of our own people in 3 days." The alien diplomats began shifting nervously in their seats. They were starting to understand that humans were not normal. "But here is what you need to know," Ambassador Green said, his voice becoming harder. "These examples show human restraint. In each case, we held back. We could have done much worse." The hologram changed to show massive rockets pointing at the sky. "These are our current weapons," the ambassador said. "We call them planet crackers. One of these missiles can destroy an entire world. We have built 12,000 of them. We test them regularly to make sure they work properly." A Void Runner diplomat raised his hand nervously. "Surely you would never use such weapons," he said. Ambassador Green smiled a cold human smile. "We have used them 18 times in the past 50 years, he said. "On asteroids, moons, and dead planets. We practice destroying worlds, so we know how to do it efficiently." The room became completely silent. The aliens realized they were not negotiating with a peaceful species. They were sitting across from the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. "Let me show you our military exercises," Ambassador Green continued. The hologram displayed human warships conducting training missions. "This is what we call a small patrol fleet. 50 ships practicing attack formations. We do this every week, in every human system." The next image showed human Marines training for combat. They were practicing in environments that would kill most other species. "Our soldiers train in acid rain, poison gas, and radioactive zones," the ambassador explained. "We prepare for wars in places where other species cannot even survive. We assume our enemies will try to kill us in the most horrible ways possible. But the most frightening demonstration came last." Ambassador Green showed recordings of human children in school. "These are 8-year-old humans learning about military history," he said. "We teach our children about every war we have ever fought. They study tactics, strategies, and weapons from the time they can read." The hologram showed human children building model tanks and drawing pictures of battle scenes. "By the time our children become adults, they have studied 10,000 years of human warfare," Ambassador Green said. "They know more about fighting than most alien generals." The ambassador turned off the hologram and returned to his seat. When he spoke again, his voice was friendly and polite, as if he had been discussing the weather. "Now then," he said, "shall we discuss a fair treaty that benefits everyone?" The negotiations ended that same day. The alien powers agreed to give humans everything they had originally demanded. They did not ask for money or territory. They did not try to limit human expansion. They were too afraid to make demands. After the meeting, Sethkar approached Ambassador Green privately. He had to ask the question that was bothering him. "Were you threatening us?" Sethkar asked. Ambassador Green looked surprised. "Threatening you? Oh no, Commander, I was educating you. I wanted to make sure you understood what you were dealing with. Humans prefer to be friends rather than enemies. But if friendship is not possible, we are very good at being enemies." Sethkar finished his final story and stood up slowly. The young officers sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything they had heard. "That was my final lesson about humans," he told them. "They do not make threats, they make promises. And when humans promise to be your friend, they will die for you. But when they promise to be your enemy, you will wish you had never been born." The old commander walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to his audience. "Remember this above all else," he said. "Humans are our allies because they choose to be. Pray to whatever gods you believe in that they never change their minds." The lights dimmed as Sethkar left the room, leaving the young officers alone with their thoughts about the most dangerous species in the galaxy.